It's your Tuesday daily delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Hope you guys are doing well out there. Feels good outside this morning. I stepped outside for just a bit before we started recording here. Let the dog outside, stuff like that. The humidity seems like it's finally going away. It's been hot and humid. Not that hot, but, sticky. Sticky, as we like to call it. Not as bad as in other parts of the country. I get it. We're relatively spoiled here in the summertime. It's never that bad when it's that hot, but it felt good out there today. So I'm saying, take me with you today. Take me with you on a walk, on a run, somewhere like that. I've got one listener who does that every Tuesday morning, it sounds like, with Royce. I'll get to that here in a minute. Get to another listener email as well here in a little bit. Marcus Fuller from the Star Tribune joins me here in just a little while as well to talk Gopher men's basketball, to talk a little bit more about athletic director Mark Coyle and his budget proposal, talking with the Board of Regents last week. Marcus was covering that and just kind of the future of Gophers athletics, college sports, where we're headed with that. Marcus has some NBA Summer League, Cam Christie thoughts, and some Gopher football and volleyball at the end, too, because Marcus hit media availability for those teams last week. A little update, a little discussion of those squads as well. First, though, what did I miss? It's a slow week, right? Traditionally, one of the slowest sports weeks of the year. Baseball All-Star Game tonight. I used to care a lot about the All-Star Game. I used to care about the Home Run Derby. I just don't really anymore. So there's that. Maybe you do. Maybe it's not a slow sports week if you're still into that. But the Derby was last night. Game tonight. I'm sure I'll flip it on. I'm sure I'll watch it. Ken Cha, by the way, from the Star Tribune, wrote a good piece about this 10 years since Target Field hosted the All-Star Game. I guess that feels about right. Sometimes you hear an anniversary and you're like, man, that was 10 years ago. And I think back on that, I'm like, yeah, okay, that does kind of feel like it was 10 years ago. It feels like it was a while ago, but you should go check out his kind of retrospective by the numbers on Target Field hosting the All-Star Game 10 years ago. But yeah, just kind of thinking about this week and how there's not much going on, right? You got Summer League, WNBA is still going on, of course, but they're going to take a break here pretty soon, so it's going to get even slower. You got the void, of course, of the NFL kind of between the last, mini camp and training camp, so no real on the field news there. So it's just always kind of a slower time. So I was kind of poking around, like, what am I interested in today? And I came across this piece in ESPN. James Dolan, Knicks owner, complaining about the latest NBA media rights deal that was reported on last week. Good chance it gets voted on and approved this week. It sounds like at they got some meetings in Vegas this week, coinciding with Summer League. 11 years, $76 billion. Going to make everybody gobs of money. The players, the owners, the league, everybody. Maybe everybody with the TV partners. They got to be getting something out of this if they're paying $76 billion over 11 years. So you're thinking, like, what does an NBA owner have to complain about when you're going to sign this, deal that's basically like $7 billion a year in media rights? Players have to be ecstatic. Sounds like the salary cap is going to go up 10% every year. That's the maximum it can go up. You're going to get to a point in about 10 years where some of the best players, some of the max contract players, could be making $100 million a year. $100 million a year. You could have contracts, those extensions that are now, just over $300 million, and you're like gasping. 5 years, $300 million? You could have contracts $400, $500 million in a decade when this cap keeps going up, in large part because of these media rights deals. So what does an owner have to complain about? Well, Dolan, of course, the Knicks are probably the biggest market team in the entire NBA, right? They're in New York. They're the big team in New York. He's complaining about a few things, but one that caught my eye was complaining about what this deal could do to the local carriage of teams, the regional sports networks. And so he's basically saying because there's so many more options in this contract to show games on different networks, on streaming platforms like Peacock and Amazon Prime is probably the biggest one. Because there's that opportunity, the role of regional sports networks is diminished so much that he has called them, I think the word he used was unviable. He wrote a letter to wrote a letter to the league outlining, a lot of things he doesn't like about it. ESPN got a hold of it. He sent it to the Board of Governors on Monday, or they got a hold of it on Monday. He's basically saying, he said, quote, "The NBA has made the move to an NFL model, de-emphasizing and depowering the local market. Soon your only revenue concern will be the sale of tickets and what color next year's jersey will be. Don't worry, because due to revenue pooling, you are guaranteed to be neither a success nor a failure. Of course, to get there, the league must take down the successful franchises and redistribute to the less successful. This new media deal goes a long way to accomplishing that goal." He is definitely an outspoken critic. You're like, everybody's going to get rich. What's the problem? And he's like, well, everybody's going to be the same now. And I'm sure a lot of teams are saying, yeah, what's the problem with that? We're all going to be making money hand over fist. Just quiet down and take the money. But he's worried about the effect really on the local at the local level. And he said, "Member teams depend on revenue received from local rights fees and on increased fan engagement through high-quality broadcasts that provide dedicated and tailored coverage for local audiences. Yet the proposal threatens to completely eliminate regional sports networks without a comparable replacement offered by the league and no articulated plans to address the production and distribution vacuum that the league will inevitably create in its quest to further disrupt the RSN industry." He adds, "The increased number of exclusive and non-exclusive games means that national partners would have the ability to air nearly half of the regular season and all postseason games. This reduction in available games for RSNs risks rendering the entire RSN model unviable. The inclusion of streaming partners in the proposal, for example, Amazon Prime Video and Peacock, allows fans in all NBA markets to bypass their RSN to watch certain games in their local market. The proposal offers no local protection for RSNs." Interesting in that, we're in the middle, of course, of all of these battles between RSNs and cable companies, carriers, teams, leagues. Major League Baseball has kind of been at the forefront of this. Going to get a hearing pretty soon, a couple weeks, a decision on the financial viability of the RSN model going forward. I think it's July 29th and 30th. We're going to find out kind of if Bally Sports, Diamond Sports, the parent company, can go forward with this and, be a viable model. And Dolan's basically saying, hey, if we're talking about the NBA, this model is going to be obsolete in a year. These new TV contracts will take effect in the 2025-26 season. He's saying RSNs will not be what they used to be if this goes through. So something that bears watching in this whole kind of swirl of what's going on with RSNs, what's going on with Bally Sports, is the impact of the NBA. It's not just the NBA, of course. The Twins, the Wild, the Lynx, the Wolves, they are all on Bally Sports North, so it's not just one team. But if the NBA shifts to this other model, and I think it's a model really that baseball wants to get to, not sure what hockey will do eventually, but it's a model that baseball is trying to get to as well. If they do that and sign a new contract that kind of renders the model obsolete, it could go a long way to determining how we watch games in the future.
I'm Chris Hine, Timberwolves beat writer at the Star Tribune and the first 5-time guest in daily delivery history. Thank you for listening to this podcast. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast, our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, and even all of Rand's future blog posts about how the Timberwolves should trade for players they will never get, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
Glad to be joined today by Marcus Fuller from the Star Tribune, covers college basketball, Gopher sports, all of the above. Marcus, how is your off season going?
Not bad at all. I think last time we talked, I was just about to head to the lake, get some fishing in. I did that. Haven't been back since. Okay. So I'm a little cranky about that, but I think I'll probably be going there soon enough. But yeah, we Fuller family's been getting over a little cold here and there, but
Okay.
other than that, we've been out and about doing our thing, and yeah, it's been a probably busier than usual mid-July. We can talk about that coming up, obviously, but yeah, it's been interesting.
It has. And yeah, the kind of the first thing on that agenda, you covered Board of Regents and Mark Coyle having a discussion last week, kind of the annual budget, the annual report, stuff like that. Anytime right now is, there's so many changes in college sports that sometimes these, kind of what seems like a routine or rubber stamp kind of meeting kind of becomes interesting. What were your takeaways from what Mark Coyle said and what he got asked last week by the Board of Regents?
Yeah, I mean, this might make a record here. First time we're talking about Board of Regents stuff on the podcast, but yeah, I think as we talked about kind of off the podcast, a lot of times these regent meetings aren't huge news unless you're talking about a coach's contract. Obviously, 4 years ago they dropped a bomb on everyone and cut sports, and you never know sometimes with these meetings. So we definitely make sure we check all the boxes. And this time around, last week we were kind of alerted to Mark Coyle in his annual budget report discussing the changes that are upcoming, with college athletics, and adding, the NIL piece of it with the House settlement and the NCAA $2.8 billion settlement that they had last month, and that'll be added to the budget for 25-26.
Yep.
So not this season, but the following season, and also they're going to be shared revenue with athletes moving forward. So the sooner they can alert the Board of Regents and the university about these changes, the better. And they're kind of bracing for it. And a lot of people saw it as kind of kick in the teeth, bad news. Yeah, that's for everyone else, but like the top level football and basketball players, right? And maybe some hockey guys that are going to get quite a bit of that chunk of shared revenue and NIL from the university. But everyone else is going to have to adjust quite a bit. And I think that's what Coyle was getting into were the changes that are going to be made to the experiences of athletes, mainly the non-revenue athletes. There's quite a bit is going to change there.
Marcus, we call those Olympic sports now, not non-revenue. It's a much nicer way to talk about those.
Is that the more politically correct?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't want to say the Olympics are upon us, so I don't want to,
yes.
I don't want to throw the Olympians under the bus at all, but
it's not to speak ill of the Olympics. We call them Olympic sports now. Right, it's much more polite. But I think my takeaway from that, and I wasn't there, but just kind of reading what you wrote and kind of looking back at some of it, my take was just kind of what you said, that the big revenue sports are going to have to drive even more of their revenue, and then because of that, they're going to take a lot of that. What Coyle said would be about $21 million a year to the money that's going to pay players, and that also. But to me, for the sports that aren't included in that group, there's going to be some. It's not just going to be haves and have-nots. I think there'll be some have-somes also. The kind of those programs that do well but don't drive a ton of revenue, like your volleyball or women's basketball, men's and women's hockey to a certain degree. Although men's hockey does drive quite a bit of revenue, but sports that do generate some revenue. But then, there's the sports that don't get much attendance and basically are all about experience and a well-rounded athletic department. I wasn't sure if he was hinting at less travel and smaller scholarship sizes, or if he's thinking that sooner rather than later, and maybe very sooner, that there could be more program cuts on the horizon. He was even asked about that? What was your kind of response, or what did you think of that response, and where does that leave you as you think about that?
Well, he was pretty vague, but we've already had a conversation. The Star Tribune and our columnist Chip Scoggins had a good conversation with him, and we've had conversations with them. Or I've had, since a lot of these things have come down. Yeah. And scholarship reduction is happening. That's going to happen. Obviously they haven't decided because they have a little bit of time, but you can see some of the Olympic sports probably reducing scholarships. They have to, try to stay in line with Title IX. So, you'll probably see more of the men's sports being hit than others. But, he was asked by Regent Turner directly about sports cuts and saying that, we can't be blindsided by this. We'd like to know ahead of time if these things are coming because there's a big fallout from that. I mean, 4 years ago, we're still hearing from it. We still hear from a lot of the athletes and former athletes and the coaches about it, especially every Regent meeting, right?
Yeah.
But I think that, right now, his answer to that was that's not the answer or the direction that they're going. I don't know how much money you save, really. I mean, I'll just bring up gymnastics. The last time around, men's gymnastics was cut, and they could have really funded themselves, after the fact. So it's more than just that. I think the sports cuts the first time around were more Title IX, I think, than anything, and then they obviously used that excuse to try to save some money that they could use for football or what have you. But I think it was more Title IX than anything. This time around, the money is going to come from other things. You mentioned it, and he did discuss it. The changes in travel. They're already going to play a more national schedule, right? By adding the Pac-12 teams. But other than conference play, you're going to probably see a lot of those other sports, or maybe even basketball. Maybe not make such huge trips for non-conference. More regional, non-conference. I know the men's basketball team has this tournament in Orlando, Florida, coming up in November. But they're not going what Tubby used to go to Hawaii and Bahamas, right, and Puerto Rico. They're not doing those anymore.
Right.
I think you brought it up, like traveling changes, reduction in scholarships. Just overall experience, not to say that you're going to come in there and feel like it's totally different program than what it used to be. They still want to treat the athletes like they just, they're Big Ten athletes. I mean, there's going to be a lot of money coming in from TV contracts and, NCAA tournament, the college football playoff. But again, those will have to be allocated in a certain way. You mentioned the $21 million that they're going to have to share revenue with athletes. But then you also have the colleges taking over NIL now. Dinkytown athletes is still going to be involved. They really will still be involved because NIL through Dinkytown, that's vital. I think people get confused, and I get confused sometimes. When the NCAA and the settlement happened, they said all of a sudden now, starting in a year from now, that the universities will be able to take over NIL.
Yeah.
When they said that, they did not mean that the collectives will vanish.
Okay.
Some of the schools will say, "Hey, we'll just take over." The collectives. We don't need you anymore. But schools like Minnesota, they need the collective because the collective. What they do is they handle contracts through the athletes directly. Right. And they're able to set up sort of like an agency, a lot of this NIL with corporations and things like that the university doesn't have to worry about, But again, the university is also going to come up with their own NIL, and I think that's a little bit different, That's more of the shared revenue part. So it should be interesting. I think that the athletes understand their value now more than any time in sports, and so you'll see the athletes that have the most the biggest brand, the most attention, whether it's social media or just straight up success on the field, on the court, where have you. And those are the ones that'll be getting paid the most. I mean, you can have a gymnast that has a lot of followers or that's winning championships or Olympic level or what have you, that a wrestler, we've had it in the past. So there's chances that athletes have if you don't play the most high profile sports to make a lot of money, and then, but again, I think that people worry about how is the university going to come up with this money? They haven't done the most awesome job fundraising over the years. They're still paying the university back for, loans that they had to pay for the facility. It's a great facility. It almost still looks new in a lot of ways.
It does.
But the fact that they're still paying for it, from some of the loans, I mean, that's just crazy because there's a lot more money out there that the university needs. And, it's you're kind of scratching your head of where it's going to come from.
I agree with that. Final point on this, and then let's get into some basketball specific stuff, maybe a couple other sports too. I wrote about this last week. Like you and I have both covered the U to varying degrees for a long time. You more closely, obviously, in last decade or two. But even from afar, Marcus, there's never really been a time that I can remember where there wasn't some sort of budget, crisis question in Gopher athletics. My question to you is: does this feel different to you, just because this is, while it's still another budget question, is this different than just, hey, I don't know how we're going to pay Coach X or things like that? Does this feel like an all new kind of a whole new ball game at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at it and it just blows your mind. The first it was the transfer portal. Men's basketball, was hit more than I've ever seen it in a month. They lost almost their entire roster, the returning roster.
When Patino left, you mean? Is that when Patino left?
No, I mean, I'm just, just recently,
or every year since then. Yeah.
Yeah. But, Patino, obviously that team did lose quite a few players, but, we're talking about a couple guys maybe on that team that were really like high caliber guys.
Yeah.
But I think to have a team, Tom Izzo brought it up, he thought if the Gophers brought back most of their team, they could compete for a championship. They might be the favorite,
right.
And I actually agree with that. I mean, if they would have, Cam Christie obviously got drafted. But if they were to return everyone else with Dawson Garcia, the leading scorer, returning in the Big Ten, and then you add some recruits, I would argue that they would be one of the top three teams in the Big Ten preseason going in. And this they just haven't had that. In over almost 20 years that I've covered this team, preseason they have not been rated that high, and they had the potential for that. So that's just the transfer portal. So that blows my mind that you can have so many guys that seem to be coming back, that seem to be having a good experience, that actually turned the program or the season around and had a pretty good year, 19 wins, and then all of them left, except for a couple. That surprised me. And then you add the NIL into that was the primary reason, and that's something that, every coach across the country is going through. It wasn't Ben Johnson's fault. He's not an agent. He's not the primary fundraiser for NIL. So it's just, I think it's frustrating for coaches and beat writers in a lot of ways, because you make relationships with these guys. You think you're going to cover them for at least a couple of years, and they're gone. They have a whole new team, almost a whole new team now. 9 seniors. So this will be an entirely new team next year, whether, it has nothing to do with NIL. These guys have their eligibility gone. You know what I mean? So, I think that part of it has been shocking, because, again, like fans, you get attached to players, and and last year was pretty exciting season to watch. And then all of a sudden, there's almost a completely different team. The football team, there's been every year there's a handful of guys, or, dozen guys that leave, and then obviously get drafted. So I think both those sports, you got a new quarterback in football and basketball. You have almost entirely new roster. I think both of those sports fans are going to quickly find out quite a bit about guys once the season starts. But right now, there's just a lot of question marks.
Cam Christie, you mentioned him. He is in the NBA now. He's in the summer league. I saw the Clippers are 2-0. He's been starting, looks like, in their summer league lineup. On Sunday, played 25 minutes. Didn't shoot it great, but looks like he's at least getting some pretty good run there, as you would expect from a second round pick, a fresh second round pick. Have you watched any of him, and what do you think so far?
Yeah, I mean, they got the summer league all over the place, like a couple ESPN channels, ESPN Plus,
Unavoidable. Yeah, it's
NBA
unavoidable. Yeah.
TV.
Yeah.
You're gonna watch it at some point. And it was nice to see Cam out there, starting or not, like he's getting some time, and like he's got to adjust like any other rookie. But he's only 18 years old, so
Yes.
that's the shocking part is like, he's the youngest player drafted, and he's starting, he's going in there, and he's getting experience, which is great for him. He signed a 4-year contract, 2 years guaranteed, 2 years option for the team option,
Yeah.
for I think like 7 million or plus. And that's not a middle second round pick
No.
contract.
They
So
obviously see
he
some
went
upside there.
right. They went to a team that's going to invest in him.
Yeah.
Like they invested in Amir Coffey.
Mhm.
Amir Coffey did not get drafted, but he ended up getting a contract kind of like a second round pick. And Cam's gotten a contract kind of like a late first rounder almost. So
Yeah.
I'm excited for him. I think, I watched a couple of his games. He's doing what he does. He's shooting threes, hitting some. I've listened to some of the coaches talk about him and, the improvement he needs to make physically, continue that there and defensively. Obviously what he did at the U at the end of the year, he was getting to the basket a lot. So he's going to have to get used to doing that at the pro level to round out his game. But I'm excited for him, and it helps them recruit. I mean, I know I'll segue for you into one of the questions you're earlier asking about.
Yes.
Amari Allen was a recruit that came in on an unofficial visit, 6'7" wing. Actually can play the 1 and the 2 as well, from Wisconsin. He's from the Green Bay area, but he's playing for a prep school in Florida. And he's a 4-star guy, and they've compared his game to Cam Christie a little bit, maybe even a more Amir Coffey type, saying, hey, you can come in here as a freshman, and if you have the right type of season, you could possibly get drafted just like Cam did.
Right.
And that really, was selling him to come to the U. And so he set up an official visit in August. He's actually going to be there for the football opener versus North Carolina.
Okay.
He's really excited to see the atmosphere of the fans, at that game, but also just a little bit more about the team. And they have a 6'11" center from North Dakota that actually transferred to Cretin-Derham Hall. Okay. He's going to be the number one senior in Minnesota now, because he was a North Dakota Player of the Year, and he's a 4-star recruit. Tommy Aneman. Okay. He's going to be visiting on the same day with Amari Allen. In late August. And both of those guys have Wisconsin offers, and they're planning to visit Wisconsin. So, it's pretty critical that, in this day and age when, you're going to get most of your recruits from the transfer portal. If you can hit on a couple high school recruits, that's huge. I mean, these guys are going to come in. They have the talent to come in and help you right away. I mean, Aneman's like 6'11", 245 pounds. So he's already a big body. Right. And he looks the part of a Big Ten center. And Amari's got all the talent in the world, kind of like Cam did on the perimeter to come in and play a lot. So I'm excited to see what they do. Ben Johnson and his staff with those two guys. They were watching him this past weekend in the evaluation period. Amari played really well. I've seen his name in a lot of places on social media. Some of the top performers in the Adidas circuit. And Aneman played pretty well too in his for his team. He actually plays for Hard Pulley, a local team. So
okay, yep.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to recruit a lot of guys, just because the way the portal is now. Yeah, but those are two must for Ben Johnson. Must gets.
You are obviously tracking how the current team looks. They're in practices, the summer practices. They've been going on. What you're not going to replace everybody they lost with just one or two guys, but how does, especially in the backcourt, how is that competition looking right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll have a story on that coming up soon. But I think every year since Ben Johnson's gotten here, he's had to replace almost the entire backcourt. That's not what every coach hopes to happen in this kind of worst case scenario sometimes, right? But he's done a pretty good job of finding the right guys. I mean, first year he brought in Peyton Willis back, who had transferred away, and he ended up being almost all Big Ten type of guard. The following year, he brought in Talon Cooper, who ended up being a really, really solid get. Actually played even better after he transferred to South Carolina, and he helped them get to the NCAA tournament. But, he was one of the top guards in the portal. And then last year, he really hit on Elijah Hawkins, who led the Big Ten in assists, and he was one of the top assist guys in the nation. And then Mike Mitchell Jr., Cam Christie. But, you lose the Hawkins, you lose Cam Christie. Cam was kind of a thought that they were going to lose him once he was playing so well to the draft. But Hawkins, exiting the Texas Tech was a big blow. I mean, he told me after the Big Ten tournament, he told the Gophers a couple weeks later that he was staying and he left. But the transfer portal, there's always an opportunity to find the next guy. And Lukai Patterson was a local kid from Minneapolis, played for Minnesota Prep. And he was a really solid player in the portal. And he averaged 14 points a game last year at Charlotte. And, he's coming in. He's going to be a scorer for them and primary ball handler. And Isaac Asima, is a guy that he's a top recruit. I mean, he's rated, I think, top 10 point guard in the country in the senior class. So he's going to be able to learn from a lot of seniors. They have a handful of seniors from the portal that they brought in. I mean, I'll keep naming them. Caleb Williams put up 40 points versus the Gophers in an exhibition game from McAllister, local McAllister Division III. You got Brennan Rigsby from Oregon, who's a leaper, 40-inch vertical, but he's really good defensively. And he had 19 points versus Michigan when Oregon played Michigan last season. Femi Odukale is kind of the sleeper. He's a transfer from New Mexico State, but he played at Seton Hall and Pittsburgh. So he's got two programs of high major experience. He's 6'6", over 200 pounds, strong guy, can play probably 4 positions for him. And they just added, which is surprising, but they just added a couple weeks ago another transfer, Tyler Cochran from Toledo, and he's an Illinois native, and he's a big guy. I mean, he's not tall, but he's about 230 pounds. Can really defend. His conference is the Max quote defensive player of the year. So there's a lot of guys, and I think that Mike Mitchell Jr. coming back, they needed at least one guard to come back because that not only he's the older player, but he learned the system. He played well last year, especially offensively, shooting the ball. So you got all these older transfers coming in that know how to play. And then you got one that knows the system. If they can mesh, we'll see maybe a really good start like they had a couple years ago in Ben's first season, where I think they went 10-1 to start, just because you guys knew how to play. I mean, when you have these 5th, 6th-year guys, you don't need to teach them much in order to play. But once they hit the Big Ten, that's going to be the biggest indicator of how successful this season can go. And I mean, there's a lot of new faces. So as soon as I get out there, I can't wait to get out there at some point. Again, I went to practice once, but to see him a little bit more.
You were out at football and volleyball last week too. Before I let you go, I haven't heard much on either of those things lately, just because of the kind of the pattern of guests I've had on. Anything from that kind of stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, football. As you know. Anytime you can get in front of the quarterback and then the top player coming back, which I would say is Darius Taylor, especially on offense, it's awesome because you get to hear what they did in the offseason. And I can't say enough about what Randy Johnson did with the Darius Taylor story.
Yeah, that's a great story.
If you haven't read it, you got to read it. He was able to spend time with him away from the team and talk about his family situation, which are very tough. Tough is understatement, with his dad in prison for murder, but how he's overcome a lot of the obstacles there with his family to become the player he is. And just go on and read that. And, Darius talked about some of the expectations that he has coming off an injury last year and had a good bowl game. He wants to be the best back in the Big Ten and lead the Big Ten in rushing. And then Max Brosmer was the quarterback they got in the transfer portal, and the leadership he's had, and another good story about that Randy did in the offseason with
he went down to
him bringing
Georgia,
guys over to Georgia and receivers and different guys and trying to build chemistry. So it was good to catch up with those guys, and there's a bunch of others. One thing I realized they have a lot of older guys, just like the basketball team, guys with experience and leadership. So when you have that, a lot of times if they understand kind of what the culture is of the team and a winning attitude, that can translate. If they get some momentum early on in the season, they could do some things. So it was good to see that in football. Volleyball is really. I haven't been around the program in a while, since like Hugh McCutcheon. So it's kind of nice to see some of the old faces, like McKenna Werther. She's a player that when I did some stories on where she was a freshman and now she's a junior. She's their leading player coming back as far as kills per set and outside hitter. And, I think Melanie Schaffmaster is one that she's been around a long time, 5th-year senior. She's a setter. She's all Big Ten player. Just hearing her and the excitement she has for Keegan Cook's year number 2 was kind of neat. They don't start their season until September 1st, but it was good to be around the team a little bit and see some new faces and, again, some ones that have been around for a little bit. And, Keegan Cook, he's got a lot of talent. They're coming back year 2.
Let Keegan cook, right? Let's let Keegan cook. Get that slogan going, right? Awesome. Marcus, glad to catch up on all of those subjects. We'll be watching all of those things closely, especially just kind of the big picture with college athletics, Gopher athletics, whatever comes of kind of how all this impacts the department and all of the programs I have over there. It's going to be, I'm sure, a process. It's not all going to happen overnight, but over the next 1 to 3 years, I imagine, as Mark Coyle would say, it's going to look different.
Yeah, no, I can't wait to the NIL for the media members also comes into effect too. We'll see.
I don't know if that's going to happen, Marcus. We might be waiting for a while on that. We'll see.
Right.
But if it does happen, you'll be the first to know, and you'll be the first to break that story. Marcus, appreciate it as always. Good to talk over hoops and Gopher sports with you, and we'll catch up soon.
All right, thanks a lot.
Great stuff from Marcus, as always. Love catching up with him on any number of subjects, and we caught up on a lot today, so I hope you appreciated all of his insights. Let's finish with the cooler. Let's play it.
Time to check my social media, to see who loves me online. Hashtag blessed life.
2 letters that I need to read. Both of them came in, I think, either in the morning or overnight. Couple of fun ones. He says, the first one from Ken B. Very specific complaint. Says, hi, Michael. Thanks for your work making the Daily Delivery podcast, especially the Monday ones with Patrick Royce. Often, it's a hoot to listen to him rant, and your reporting on the Bally Sports Comcast situation has been invaluable, for which you deserve extra thanks. Thank you, Ken. A letter from Ken. It says, today he and you referred again, I think, to the soccer pitch as the biggest playing field in sports. Unless you were limiting it to common Western Hemisphere sports, I think that's incorrect. Both an Australian rules football field and a cricket ground are bigger playing surfaces. Sorry for the nitpick from an old guy. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Ken. That is good. I will bring that up to Royce. I don't know how that will be taken. It could result in another rant because, Royce doesn't love nitpicking sometimes, but I will bring that up. I'll try to remember to bring that up to Royce next Monday and see what he thinks about that. Maybe we can find an even bigger playing surface. The last one comes from Mark, kind of related. He says, good morning. I look forward to my run every Tuesday morning. Maybe he waits a day. Maybe his run is so early that the podcast isn't ready yet by the time he goes for his run. I look forward to my run every Tuesday morning and listen to you and Pat talk about the stories of the week. But when Pat said, why does everyone complain? I almost lost it. What would Pat be without complaining? Thank you for the great podcast and a great newspaper. I read it every morning. From Mark. Love it, Mark. You're right. Royce maybe does make a living off of complaints. Not all of it. That's not all he does, of course. But yeah, where would Royce be without complaining? So Royce, yes, saying Royce saying, what are people complaining about? Maybe is a little bit got to look in the mirror sometimes, and maybe he's doing a little tongue in cheek as well. Thanks, everybody, for listening today. Keep those letters coming. Love to hear from everybody. Until Wednesday, I am Michael Rand, back at it again tomorrow.